Well, good evening. It's good to see everyone. Welcome, everybody, our core, our regulars, it looks like. It's all good. We've been going through Ruth, and this is the final lesson of Ruth. A beautiful, beautiful picture of resilience in so many different ways. The title of this sermon is Resilient Redemption, where we see that Ruth and Naomi are actually redeemed now. I like to go over the overview of Ruth and the points of application. And always, just in case there's somebody out there, I don't see anybody out there that doesn't know this, but remember, Ruth is under the patriarchal dispensation, not patriarchal, the Mosaic dispensation. Patriarchal dispensation was only Genesis. Exodus through John is Mosaic. Christian law, which we live in under now, Acts through Revelation. This is the time frame, the time of the judges, where Ruth enters the picture. The precise dates are here, not precise. The guesstimated-ish dates that are probably pretty accurate, pretty good ballpark, are these dates here. So remember, Moses dies in the 1400s. The era of the judges is 1300s to the thousands BC. Late 1100s, that's when Elimelech enters the picture. And that's when Ruth enters the picture. Takes his family to Moab. Elimelech dies, his sons die, and then Naomi and Ruth are left. And this is the end right here, 1100 BC, when Ruth gives birth to Obed. That actually happens in this chapter. And then just to give the bigger picture of the overflow afterwards, that's why I put Samuel there. Samuel comes a little bit after. Saul enters the picture. David enters the picture. This is very quick after the story of Ruth. That's why I threw that in there. And we know that Ruth is the great-grandmother of David. It's super beautiful. This is the big picture. If you're just going to look at the big picture of Ruth, Naomi, she starts with bitterness. She ends with hope and joy. Ruth, she starts as an outcast. She ends as an insider. Naomi and Ruth, they start empty, and then they end up full at the end in this chapter. And Boaz the Redeemer is the one that changes everything through the Lord's providence. Glory to the Lord, not just Boaz himself, obviously. The key takeaway, key application as far as redemption goes. Remember, redemption means to be bought back with a price. And to us Christians, that means a great deal. Because in Romans 3:23 to 24, it says that we all sin and fall short of the glory of God, but by God's grace, what happened? Jesus justified us. He redeemed us. It was through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus that we have this justification from sin and from lostness. And knowing that as Christians, before we became Christian, we needed to seek that redemption out. And after we receive it, we still seek it out. It doesn't end there, you see. Just because we're saved doesn't mean, okay, it's done, I got baptized, we're done, and then we're all good. It doesn't work that way. We still need to seek the Lord's redemption all the time. You see, we still need to seek His cleansing all the time and embrace it. That's why it needs to be maintained in a relationship with Jesus, in a relationship with God and the Spirit. See, with the Godhead. Maintaining the relationship looks like what we talked about today. Over and over again, we see obedience, we see following, we see trusting, we see transformation. That's how it's maintained. That's how redemption is maintained, and that's how we know we're maintaining our redemption, by seeing us grow more in love with God and more into the image of God. On top of that, it's perpetual. What do I mean by that? Not just in our personal life, but we're supposed to be passing it on somehow, some way. If we have children, obviously we need to pass it on to our children. But it's not just that. People in our lives, period. We need to try to pass it on to our parents. We need to pass it on to our coworkers, our friends, our schoolmates. You see, in this lesson, we're going to see that it was passed on through generations. Faith is passed on. Legacy is passed on. But we'll get to that. So 3 points. The key takeaway is for if these points are like, too many points, right? 3 points that we see in this chapter. Point number 1, initiation for redemption. How is it initiated? That's what's so cool about narratives like this in the Bible. These Old Testament narratives. The New Testament, awesome. Tells us how to live. Tells us how to obtain salvation, how to stay saved. Beyond that, how to have a relationship with God and be transformed. Beautiful. But there's some stories, there's some details that we can only learn from the Old Testament narratives concerning subjects like this. And one of them is redemption. You see, the initiation for redemption is much deeper than just Jesus dying on the cross. See, on the ground level, to the God of Israel and the people of Israel, it meant so much more. So many things happen as far as redemption goes. And I can't wait to talk about that. That's point number one. Point number two, marriage and redemption. In this case, Boaz the Redeemer bought back Naomi and Ruth and the property and married Ruth. But after Ruth was married to Boaz, she was just like, yay, I can do whatever I want now. No, she was faithful. She was loyal. Boaz and Ruth decided to live a life to seek God and seek God's will and live it out. That's what marriage in redemption should look like for the Lord. The result of redemption, you want me to flash forward all the way to the end? Jesus. Jesus was the result of their faithfulness because of the perpetuation of generations that was passed on by God's providence, by God's will, by God's plan, by God's grace. All right, so chapter 1 recap. Remember, time of the judges, the famine hits. Elimelech takes his family to Moab, which is an enemy country, enemy region. We don't know whether or not Elimelech intentionally rebelled against God. We don't know any of that. All we know is that his family was starving, so he brought him to Moab to survive. Unfortunately, Elimelech and his sons die from that. And then, like I said before, Naomi and Ruth, they survive. They're alone. Chapter 2, Naomi and Ruth go back to Bethlehem. After they hear that, oh, Bethlehem, there's food there again. So they go back, and then they happen to meet Boaz. That's what the text says. They happen to meet Boaz, run into Boaz, and Boaz happens to be a kinsman redeemer. Boaz happens to notice Ruth working in the field because of her resilience and her faith, and then he favors her. Chapter 3, that's what we went over last time. Naomi's like, I have a good idea. Why don't you go propose to Boaz? And she did. And everything worked out according to Naomi's faith and Naomi's wisdom, the way that she wanted it to. Not the way she wanted it to, the way that God wanted it to. Let's put it that way. Boaz responds well to the proposal. And then at the end of that chapter, they have to wait. They don't know what the answer is. They don't know what the outcome's going to be. But now we know what the outcome's going to be in chapter 4. And that's what we're going to be talking about. Remember, there was one other kinsman redeemer in front of Boaz that had the right to redeem Naomi and Ruth and the property of Elimelech. One guy, and then I'm just going to give it away, he decides not to redeem Naomi, Ruth, or the property. And we'll see why in the text. Then Boaz does get to redeem Naomi, Ruth, and the property. And then, as you heard Matthew read, they marry, they have children, we see the lineage. All right, let's go. So point number 1, initiation for redemption. I already said that. Verse 1. Legacy Standard is LSB if you didn't know. That was weird. So basically like a better version of the New American Standard 2020. So verse 1. Now Boaz went up to the gate. And what's the gate? When you read about the gate, it's where the officials met, officials of the city. Went up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the kinsman redeemer of whom Boaz spoke, he was talking about in the last chapter, there's a guy ahead of him that has a right to buy them back. That's this guy. So the kinsman redeemer of whom Boaz spoke was passing by. So he's just like walking, who knows what he's doing? Maybe he was grocery shopping, I don't know. Regardless, so Boaz said, turn aside, my fellow, sit down here. And the guys could have said, I'm busy. Or who are you to tell me what to do? He didn't do that. This guy, he turned aside and sat down. Remember, Boaz had a good reputation. He had respect of the people. So people responded very well to him. So that he sat down, and remember, I put cold call there because, that's what it is. Like, hey, come over here right now, even though you're busy. Or you meet a stranger and say, hey, let's talk about the gospel. That's a cold call. And he responded to that. Verse 2. Then he, this is Boaz, took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. Same thing, 10 elders of the city. Took time out of their busy lives to say, okay, let's hear this guy out. Because he had respect. Remember, he was a faithful man. He always acknowledged Yahweh in all of his ways. He was generous. He was a hard worker. He was a kind and loving person, compassionate person. But let's keep reading. So they all sit at this gate. And then verse 3, then Boaz, said to the kinsman redeemer, the other guy that's in line, Naomi, who has come back from the fields of Moab, and he's clarifying, it's Moab, guys, right? It should be a red flag for a lot of people. Fields of Moab has to sell the portion of the field which belonged to our brother Elimelech. See? So this is what needs to be redeemed, the property of Elimelech, the guy that died. Verse 4a. So I thought, this is Boaz still talking, so I thought to uncover this matter in your hearing, saying, acquire it before in front of those who are sitting here and before in front of the elders of my people. So again, it's hard to ignore this, how Boaz operates, how Boaz sees things. He's respecting the authority and the order, the law of the land, also the law of Moses, we'll see. You see, he has high regard for authority. And that is so good. That's such a good characteristic to have, you see. All right, so let's keep going. He's saying there needs to be witnesses, it needs to be official. That's basically what he's saying here. 4b, now he's talking to the guy, the other guy that is in front of him. If you will redeem it, buy it back. But if no one redeems it, tell me that I may know. For there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am after you. And then what does this guy in line say? This is his first reaction. He said, I will redeem it. He didn't really know all the facts yet. He wasn't really thinking about it. At first he says, I will redeem it. All right. Remember, there's no name there. It doesn't even matter. He agrees at first, but what happens? Verse 5. Then Boaz said, on the day you acquire the field, okay, you're going to get the property, from the hand of Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth, the Moabitess. See, that's part of the deal. You have to take Ruth as your wife now if you're going to buy this property. And he emphasizes, Ruth, the Moabitess. That's a repeated phrase over and over again. The widow of the one who had died. And for what purpose? Just because? No. It says, in order to raise up the name of the one who had died. What does that mean? It means have babies with her. Pass on the lineage. That's what that means. Raise up the name of the one who had died on behalf of his inheritance. All right, now, so look at the response now. So verse 6, he thought about it. He's like, okay, it's not just property. Now I have to marry this Moabitess and have children with her. So verse 6, so the kinsman redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself. He's backing out now, see? Lest I ruin my own inheritance. He's saying, in fear of I ruin my own inheritance. But wait a minute, think about this. First he said, sure, I'll take the property, and that's it. And then once he said, marry Ruth. Nah, I'm going to ruin my inheritance, see? So put two and two together, and you see, okay, it's because Ruth was added to the mix, he said no. But let's keep reading. He's saying, so this no-name guy that's in line first, he tells Boaz, you redeem my right of redemption for yourself. He says, you can have it. Because I cannot redeem it. It's not that he can't, he won't. See? Interesting. Verse 7. This is one of the most fascinating aspects of it. Now this is narrative mode now. Narrator mode. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the right of redemption and the exchange of land to establish any matter. A man removed his sandal and gave it to another. This was the manner of attestation in Israel, but this was also in the old law. Now, some translations say custom, see, and it is. It became a custom. It was literally customized from the old law, because the old law version of this is a little bit harsh. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to read it real quick. I didn't put it on the slides, but since it's fascinating, I'm going to read it from Deuteronomy chapter 25, starting in verse 5, talking about this very situation. Deuteronomy 25, starting in verse 5. And the law of Moses says this: if brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go in her, take her as a wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. All right? So the brother is supposed to marry if the woman is widowed. Verse 6, and it shall be that the firstborn son which he bears will succeed the name of his dead brother, that is his name may not be blotted out of Israel. So this gives us a little bit of hint too. Why would this guy lose his inheritance or ruin his inheritance? Is because the new baby might actually take over all that stuff if the situation arises. But let's keep reading in verse 7 in Deuteronomy chapter 25. See, this, like I said, is more intense than just exchanging sandals. Look at verse 7. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate of the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Verse 8. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her. Verse 9, then his brother's wife, listen to this, this is kind of intense. Then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, see, and answer and say, so it shall be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. And then verse 10, well, think about that. That's obviously not a blessing. You see, it's not like, good job. No. Not a good thing. And then verse 10, and his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him who had his sandal removed. That's the name forever. If the guy refuses, it's like, okay. Interesting. But that's actually what the law says, and then they customized it to talk about exchange and settle matters. Look at verse 8. And Ruth, we're in Ruth chapter 4 now. We're right back to the Ruth. Ruth chapter 4, verse 8. So the kinsman redeemer, the no-name guy, said to Boaz, acquire this for yourself. You can have it. You can redeem it. And then what did he do? He removed his sandal. See? Indicating that Boaz had the right to the land and Boaz had the right to Ruth. You see? And then at the bottom footnote, I said, hopefully Boaz had Lysol, right? If he's going to take the sandal. All right. Verse 9. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, all these people are witnesses, he's saying, you are witnesses today that I have acquired all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon, Sickly and Pining are their names, from the hand of Naomi. See? So look, like I said, when you look at it carefully, the depth of redemption, redeemers are responsible for buying back all. Yes, jumping forward, we talk about Christ buying back all the penalty for our sin. They're responsible for absorbing all of the debt and all of the consequences that are to come with that. That's what redeemers did. Verse 10a, and also, this is Boaz, I have acquired Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, to be my wife in order to raise up the name, have children, pass on the name, of the one who had died on behalf of his inheritance. So redemption requires people, not just property. See? Hence, we are a redeemed people. We know that. 10b, so that the name of the one who died will not be cut off from his brothers or from the gate of his birthplace. You are witnesses today. Redemption keeps people from getting cut off. See? We look at the fine details. 11a, and all the people who were in the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May Yahweh grant the woman who is coming into your home to be like Rachel and Leah. We're going to get there soon in the Genesis class. Rachel and Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel. What do they mean by that, built the house of Israel? Because the lineage came from them. All the thousands and thousands and thousands of people came from them, the nation of Israel. See? And that's what he means by that. May Yahweh grant to Ruth the same perpetuation that Leah and Rachel had. And we know that that Yahweh did grant that. So the witnesses approve, the witnesses bless. 11b, and so you shall achieve excellence in Ephrathah, and shall proclaim your name in Bethlehem. The blessing continues, achieve excellence, proclaim the name, you see. And we see that has happened too when you flash forward. Look at these details. Redemption is so much more than just buying back property. Redemption is just so much more than just Jesus dying on the cross. All these things happen from redemption. Verse 12, moreover, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. We're going to talk about that once we get to the last point, that genealogy. Through the seed which Yahweh will grant you by this young woman. The seed will go on is the point. All right, so let's look at the immediate contextual application here. Just looking at the Old Testament narrative itself. Look at the resilience of Boaz, doing everything according to the respect, the honor, the dignity of following authority, the submission to authority. You see? And to look at the fine details again. What redemption meant to God, what redemption meant to the people of God, to the law of God in the ancient times. It's absolutely stunning. Remember, Boaz took off the sandal when no one else would do it. You see? Or took the sandal, excuse me. He took the sandal when no one else would take it. It's not that the other guy couldn't, he didn't. You see? He took on the responsibility and the burden that sandal represented. And a reminder, I know we just went through this, but to buy back property, to buy back people, to pass on lineage, those are the key things that redemption does. And look at how the elders understood redemption. They're blessing the marriage, they're blessing the seed, they're hoping the seed will establish Israel or the nation, they're hoping the Redeemer will proclaim the name. You see, all these things are tied to redemption. And then now let's flash forward to the Christian parallel. The ultimate Redeemer, Jesus, took on all of our debt, all of our consequences, all of our sin, all of our problems, all of our burdens. Jesus is the burden bearer. When you read the end of Matthew chapter 11, he continues to do that for us every day in our life. Marriage, well, yeah. Christ is married to his bride, the church. We talked about that this morning, whom he bought back with a price, with a bride price. He established the New Testament, the new covenant. He established the way of salvation, and he proclaims his name through the gospel forever, perpetually. And the sandal. Jesus took the sandal when no one else could, no one else would. See, he took it on. He took on the responsibility and the burden of us all of our messes, all of our lives, from all of our souls, from all time. All right, point number 2, marriage and redemption. Point number 1 was the longest, so you can be like, yay. Point number 2, once Ruth was redeemed, what did she do? She lived according to that redemption. She maintained that relationship of redemption with her Redeemer. She shared the same purposes, the same plan, the same goals as our Redeemer. So let's go to verse 13 in Ruth chapter 4. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and went into her, and Yahweh granted her conception, and she gave birth to a son. So I put extremely concise summary of the marriage. It's more to it than that, obviously. But I want you guys to consider how they interacted with each other in all of the book of Ruth. Obviously, it wasn't just, yay, we got married and had babies, done. No. Look at how they treated each other with respect and dignity. Look how they favored each other, they served each other. They're not going to stop doing that, you see. Obviously, they did that all their life together. And the main thing is that they shared the same goal and the same faith, understanding that they're living for Yahweh the whole time. And the last part here, the Lord grants. The Lord grants conception. The Lord grants all life. You see, without him granting it, it's not possible. So always remember that. Verse 14. Then the women in the community, then the women said to Naomi, blessed is Yahweh, who has not left you without a kinsman redeemer today, and may his name be proclaimed in Israel. Who's his name? Well, there's several translations that say the child they're talking about. The child that was born is his name, or it's Boaz's name, but it doesn't matter because it's talking about the family name in general that's going to be passed on to be proclaimed in Israel. And we see the end result in the New Testament. That name passed on is Jesus the Christ. Verse 15. May he, this is the women talking, may he also be to you a a, restorer of your soul. Interesting language, see? a restorer of your soul, and a sustainer of your old age. So this also comes from the lineage of the redemption, or the Redeemer himself. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Okay, now we're looking at the context more carefully. Looks like it's talking about the child that's going to do this. That's going to be the restorer of the soul and sustainer of the old age. Restore and sustainer. Redemption brings those things. See? We know it's David's great-grandfather, right? Let's keep going. Verse 16, then Naomi took the child and put him on her bosom and became his nurse. Why is this important? Naomi treated the child like her own, nurtured him, cherished him, raised him as long as she possibly could. You see, that's a big deal because we see Naomi's faith shine throughout the book of Ruth also. She had a resilient faith as well. Now verse 17, this is interesting. The neighbor women gave him a name. So the neighbors named him. That's okay. Gave him a name saying, a son has been born to Naomi. So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. All right. So immediate contextual application. We already talked about this. Boaz took on all the responsibility of sustaining and supporting the family, continuing the lineage, sharing life with God and his new family. And that not only that, but Ruth embraced the same life that she shared with him. Common purpose. Children, not just physically. The heritage, the spiritual heritage, that's the thing that counts the most. The child will be the restorer of soul. The child will be the sustainer of life. Redemption causes these things, brings these things into fruition. And then we flash forward to Jesus. He wants us to share life with him, the way Ruth shared life with Boaz. He wants us to share the same purposes, the way that Ruth shared the same purposes with Boaz. Jesus wants us to be in that marriage as his church, and that's so deep, we're not going to get into the whole marriage thing. He wants us to pass on our spiritual heritage. This is one of those important points tonight. To future generations, whether it's our own children or the people around us. And he, Jesus, is the ultimate restorer of the soul and the ultimate sustainer of life, better than any physical person. Now, point number 3, last point, the result of redemption. And this is very simple. All I'm going to do is show you the lineage, and then you just think about all these people that were affected. And if you know these Old Testament stories, it'll be even more awesome. So remember, redemption is perpetual. And it's our responsibility to be diligent, do our part to pass on our faith and the truth to our children and to people in our lives. And I'll give more application at the end. Verse 18, Ruth chapter 4, verse 18. Now these are the generations of Perez. Remember, I said from verse 12, we'll talk about this. Perez became the father of Hezron. So let's think about this. Perez, whom Tamar bore Judah. We're going to see that in the account of Matthew. Remember? Judah. Messy story, but let's keep reading. That's in Genesis. Verse 19. And Hezron became the father of Ram, and Ram became the father of Amminadab. This is the Egyptian era, the era of the wilderness. Verse 20. And Amminadab became the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon became the father of Salma, or Salmon. Other translations translate. This is the wilderness, from the wilderness era to the Joshua era. That's where these generations come from. Verse 21, and Salmon became the father of Boaz, and Boaz became the father of Obed from Joshua to Judges era. See, Salmon begat Boaz of Rahab the harlot. Matthew chapter 1 says that. Oh, interesting. You see, that wasn't thrown in the narrative in Ruth, but we see that in Matthew. So where did Boaz come from? Rahab the harlot. Oh, maybe we can understand now why he was so compassionate compared to the other Israelites. I'll give you kind of a personal story application here. I may have talked about it with you guys before. My grandfather, I think I talked to all of you about this. So he experienced World War II when he was a child. Chinese, in this Chinese village, South China. Japan invades China. Japan slaughters his village in front of him with swords, with katanas. So he takes his baby sister and puts her on his back, and he runs into the forest to survive. See? You flash forward to when he moves to the States. He doesn't trust anybody. And he doesn't want any of his children to marry anybody that's not Chinese. But can you blame him for what he experienced? You see? I'm not saying that's right, but that's what happened. So, my mom eventually meets my dad. He's Vietnamese. And because of that, my grandfather did not approve of that at all. My mother had to leave the home to marry my father, and she was shunned. It wasn't until my father had my sister and took care of my mom for several years, I would say like at least 5-6 years, then my grandfather warmed up to my father because he realized that, oh, this man does love my daughter. This man does take care of my daughter, you see? But I'm tying this to my parents. Since my parents experienced that, they never want to be like that. They always opened, with open arms. Whoever you love, whoever makes you happy, marry that person. I don't care what they look like. I don't care what color they are, you see? That's my parents' mentality because of what happened, you see? Point being, no wonder Boaz was like, oh, she's the Moabitess? That's okay. All right, let's keep going. Side story, sorry. Verse 22. And Obed became the father of Jesse, and Jesse became the father of David. Yes? Judges era to king's era. David becomes the chosen king and the great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of Jesus, the chosen seed. But let's look at Matthew chapter 1, not the whole thing. We're just going to start in verses 6 to 16 to finish this lineage off. When you look at Matthew chapter 1, verse 6, where Ruth left off, and Jesse was the father of David the king, and David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. We know how that messy story happened. See, someone was killed and a wife was stolen, but Solomon came from that. Verse 7, and Solomon was the father of Rehoboam. Awesome king, right? No. Rehoboam was the father of Abijah. No. And then was the father of Asa. Bad kings, evil kings, see? I'll get to the application when I finish this. And Asa was the father of Jehoshaphat. Jumping Jehoshaphat. And Jehoshaphat was the father of Joram. And Joram was the father of Uzziah. If you know these stories, you're like, yeah, not so good. Stuff happened right there. Verse 9, and Uzziah was the father of Jotham. And Jotham was the father of Ahaz. Oh, yeah. No. No. If we talk about Ahaz. And Ahaz was the father of Hezekiah. Interesting. A man full of faith that restored a lot of things. Not perfect, but yes. He brought a comeback. Hezekiah was the father of Manasseh. Woo. But Manasseh repented. You got to consider that his faith was amazing at the end. Was the father of Amon, and Amon was the father of Josiah. Josiah's like, The father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the deportation of Babylon. And after the deportation of Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel, and Shealtiel was the father of Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel was the father of Abihud, and Abihud was the father of Eliakim, and Eliakim was the father of Azor, and Azor the father of Zadok, and Zadok the father of Achim, Achim the father of Eliud, and Eliud was the father of Eleazar, and Eleazar was the father of Matthan, and Matthan was the father of Jacob, and there we go, and Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, by whom Jesus was born, who is called the Christ. So, immediate contextual application from that genealogy, God's providence working through all of this lineage, no matter what. And here's the final application in this last point. When you look at that lineage, you saw a lot of mess. You saw a lot of evil. You saw people break the spiritual heritage and rebel against God. God worked through that. You see? It doesn't matter if they're God-seeking or evil. God's plan was still accomplished through these people. You see? But we have the choice. We have the decision. We have the ability to choose to be noted as and to be known as God seekers, as Christ seekers in our generation, in this lineage. See? That's our choice. We have a choice to try our best to pass on this lineage to everybody in our lives. I know that these people were written down already and it's written in stone. I understand that. But God still has that book of life that we read about in Revelation. How do you want to be written about? How do you want to be remembered, you see? And we don't want to be those exceptions of evil in the lineage, do we? So we have a choice as far as result goes. What is the result of our redemption going to look like in our personal life and for others around us? What is the result that we're going to express? But before I end, always consider this, because I know so many Christians that have had children, and they say, oh, you know, this child is faithful, but this child's not, and it breaks my heart, and I feel like I did something wrong. No, you didn't. That's their choice. You see, faith is personal, and it's heartbreaking, and it's sad, and I don't wish any of my children to leave the faith, but it happens. But it's not in our control. You see, we can only do our part to be the best example we possibly can, and that's it. The rest is their choice. But God's will still be done through all of this mess, through all the lineages. All right, so that's it. Initiation. Look at what Boaz did to initiate everything. You see, obviously Ruth proposed first, but still, think of how we initiate redemption with Jesus. It's not that complicated. You see, all he wants us to do is to believe in him. To believe him as the Son of God, as the Christ. To turn away from all of our garbage and all of our sins and all of our burdens, turn to him and transform. Confess him as Lord. Confess him as Savior. To be baptized for the remission of sins. That's the actual marriage ceremony, the redemption ceremony, so that when we come up out of the waters, we are the redeemed. We are his bride, you see? And then after that, not just be like, yay, I'm redeemed and saved, but perpetuate that redemption to others in our lives. And if there's someone else, anybody out there right now that has not done that, we pray that you come forward as we stand and sing the invitation song, which is 348 from the book. Thank you so much for your time and attention.